Picture this. You're at a restaurant with friends, the bill comes, and before anyone else has even glanced at it, you've already done the math in your head, silently. You know exactly what you owe, down to the tax and tip, and you're already calculating whether splitting it evenly is going to cost you $14 more than it should. Nobody taught you to do that. You just do. If that hit, this video is for you. There's a huge population of adults walking around right now who grew up without much money, not necessarily in poverty, but in that specific texture of scarcity. Counting change, wearing hand-me-downs, hearing we can't afford that often enough that it started to feel like the background noise of childhood. And here's what's fascinating. Those experiences didn't just shape your circumstances. They literally shaped your brain, your nervous system, the way you process the world. You're not stressed about money because you're bad with it. You're not hypervigilant because you're anxious. You're not calculating because you're cheap. Your brain was trained by your environment to survive. And the science behind how that happens is genuinely remarkable. Here's what nobody tells you about growing up with less. The kids who had to navigate real financial uncertainty didn't come out behind. In a lot of ways, their brains got faster, sharper, more attuned to things that other people completely miss. And understanding why that's true, that's what we're doing today. Let's start with something that might surprise you. Research from the University of Michigan found that children who grew up in lower socioeconomic environments developed what scientists call heightened environmental sensitivity. Essentially, when resources are unpredictable, the brain learns to monitor the environment constantly, scanning for shifts, tracking variables, picking up on subtle cues that most people tune out entirely. Think about what that looked like in your life. Maybe you always knew when the tension in the house was financial before anyone said a word. You could read the mood in a room the moment you walked in, a shift in your parents' posture, the way they went quiet after opening the mail. You clocked all of it. You didn't have to be told, you just knew. That's not anxiety. That's a finely calibrated threat detection system, and it runs on a neurological process called hypervigilance, an elevated baseline state of environmental scanning driven by the amygdala and prefrontal cortex working in tight coordination. The kids whose environments required them to pay close attention, they got very, very good at paying attention. Most people call this being sensitive or high-strung. The more accurate description is that you developed a sensory intelligence that the average person simply doesn't have. Here's another one. People who grew up with financial instability often have a complicated, almost fraught relationship with spending money, even after they have it. And most advice they get amounts to just relax, you have enough now, which is spectacularly unhelpful. Because the issue isn't information, the issue is wiring. Dr. Brad Klontz, a financial psychologist whose work has been featured in journals like the Journal of Financial Therapy, coined the term money scripts, the deep, often unconscious beliefs about money that get hardwired in childhood. For people who grew up without much, the most common scripts are things like money is dangerous, there's never enough, and spending is a threat. These aren't irrational fears. They were survival lessons. The brain encoded them as facts because at the time they were. The science here is about how memory forms under stress. When something happens in a high cortisol state, when you're anxious, uncertain, or scared, the hippocampus and amygdala tag that experience as important. High priority. Don't forget this. And the brain doesn't forget it. It carries it forward. It applies it automatically, even when the context has completely changed. So if you grew up watching money disappear, or fighting over it, or lying awake because of it, your brain learned that money equals threat. That lesson is stored at a level much deeper than rational thought, which is why knowing intellectually that you're fine doesn't always make you feel fine. Two different systems, two different speeds. This isn't a character flaw, it's how memory works. Now, let's talk about something that often gets overlooked, delayed gratification, but not in the way you've heard it before. You've probably heard of the Stanford marshmallow test. Kid gets a marshmallow, gets told if they'll wait 50 minutes without eating it, they'll get a second one. Kids who wait are supposedly destined for success. The study became famous. It spawned 1,000 think pieces about willpower and discipline. But here's what the follow-up research found. Research that got a fraction of the attention. Kids from less stable, lower income environments were more likely to eat the marshmallow. And for years, that was treated as evidence of poor impulse control. Except when researchers from NYU reanalyzed the data, they found something completely different. The kids who ate the marshmallow early weren't less disciplined. They were more rational. Because for a kid who's grown up in an environment where promised things don't always materialize, where adults say later and later never comes, eating the marshmallow now is the smart move. It's not impulsivity, it's calibrated decision making based on an accurate read of their environment. That is an incredible finding because it reframes what looks like a weakness as pattern recognition, as earned skepticism, as the ability to assess reliability in real time and make decisions accordingly. You learned not to count on things that hadn't happened yet. In a lot of rooms, in a lot of contexts, that makes you the most clear-eyed person at the table. Let's talk about resourcefulness, because this one deserves its own moment. There's a concept in psychology called constraints-based creativity. The idea that limits actually drive innovation. When you can't throw money or resources at a problem, your brain has to work differently. It has to lateral think, improvise, find the workaround. And people who grew up doing this, who figured out how to fix things with what was on hand, how to make things stretch, how to create fun out of almost nothing, those people have a kind of cognitive flexibility that can't be bought. MIT researchers studying problem solving across demographics have found that people who grew up with fewer material resources consistently outperformed their peers on tasks requiring creative adaptation. Not because they were smarter in a raw IQ sense, but because their problem solving pathways had more practice, more reps. If you grew up without much, you know exactly what this feels like. The birthday cake made from whatever was in the pantry. The Halloween costume assembled from things you already had. The way you could walk into any situation with limited tools and figure it out. Because figuring it out wasn't optional, it was just Tuesday. That's a skill, a real, measurable, valuable skill. And most people who grew up with everything they needed never had to develop it. Now, I want to be honest with you about something. There are genuine costs to growing up without financial security. The chronic stress of scarcity has real physiological effects. Elevated cortisol over long periods can affect sleep, immune function, and emotional regulation. Some of the hypervigilance I described earlier, while adaptive in childhood, can become exhausting in adulthood when the threat level has dropped but the alarm system hasn't gotten the memo. Some of the money scripts around scarcity can make it hard to enjoy the stability you've worked to build. I'm not here to romanticize struggle or tell you that everything that was hard was actually secretly good. That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is that the human brain is adaptive in ways that are genuinely stunning, and the adaptations that came from your specific experience are more sophisticated, more useful, and more impressive than you've probably been given credit for. Understanding that is worth something. Not to dismiss the difficulty, but to stop seeing the traits it produced as defects. Here's the last thing, and I want you to sit with this one. People who grew up without much often describe a specific kind of loneliness, not from being alone, but from feeling like they're operating on a different frequency. Like they see something other people don't. Like they're always doing a calculation in the background that nobody around them seems to be running. That's real. And it's not paranoia, and it's not poverty mindset, and it's not something you need to fix. It's the product of a childhood that asked more of you than most people's childhoods did. It's pattern recognition built from years of navigating uncertainty. It's empathy built from understanding what it means to need something and not have it. It's resilience, not the inspirational poster kind, but the functional, tested under real conditions kind that actually holds up when things get hard. You read rooms faster than most people. You solve problems with less than most people. You understand at a cellular level what actually matters and what's just noise, because you spent years having to know the difference. That's not a wound. That's a kind of wisdom. You didn't grow up without much. You grew up with a very specific curriculum. And what it taught you, most people are still trying to learn.